Good evening and welcome, everyone. My name is Dirk, and I'll be your moderator this evening. Thank you for joining this live, interactive telephone town hall. We're hosting tonight's event to give Congresswoman Spanberger the opportunity to hear directly from you and answer your questions about the issues facing Central Virginians and their families as we recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, as I mentioned, this event is an interactive forum, and Congresswoman Spanberger will take in as many questions as you possibly can during this event. So if you have a question, you can press *3 on your telephone keypad at any time. You'll be placed in line to speak with a member of our staff. They'll take down your name and where you're calling from. The next time you hear your name, you will be live on the call and able to ask your question directly. You can also ask a question by submitting one through the portal below our online streaming player at spanberger.house.gov/live. Again, that's spanberger.house.gov/live. Now, if you're watching on Facebook Live tonight and wish to ask the Congresswoman a question, we encourage you to visit our online streaming portal so you can submit your question there. So again, that's spanberger.house.gov/live. We could receive a lot of questions during tonight's event, so if we're not able to address your question, please call our district office at 804-401-4110 during normal business hours. Again, the district office number is 804-401-4110. If you have any questions throughout this event, remember, press *3 on your telephone keypad or type your question below the streaming player. Now, please welcome Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for tonight's virtual telephone town hall. I am Abigail Spanberger, and I am so proud to represent you in Congress. I am looking forward to tonight's conversation about the issues, challenges, questions that are facing Central Virginians across Virginia's 7th District. And I know front of mind for so many people is the child tax credit, which rolled out today across the country. I'm so excited that you all are able to join me today for our telephone town hall. It has been quite a while that we've been doing these telephone town halls due to COVID. It's amazing to be able to dial out to so many constituents, reach you in your home as you're cooking dinner and getting you ready for the next day. But I do look forward to doing in-person town halls again now that things are starting to open up. So be on the lookout for announcements related to that. But again, thank you so very much for joining me tonight. I want to first start by discussing the enhanced child tax credit a bit. I'm sure we'll get some questions about it, but I want to give some basic information. So the enhanced child tax credit is a change that we made through the American Rescue Plan. It's a refundable tax credit. The child tax credit first went into place in the late 1990s, and this is an expansion upon that child tax credit in the form of refundable payments. So these monthly payments started going out directly to thousands of Virginians today. And so hopefully many of the parents listening tonight have already received the payments into their bank accounts. For a little bit of background, I was proud to support the expansion of the child tax credit as part of the American Rescue Plan back in March of this year. This new law expands the 2021 child tax credit from $2,000 per child to as much as $3,600 per child, and it allows more families to benefit from this tax relief. In fact, right here in the 7th District, about 150,000 children will see the immediate impacts of this provision. So these payments are going out to thousands of our neighbors, and it's important to understand really how this fits into our economic recovery. Without a doubt, Virginia's economy is coming back. We were just rated the #1 state for business, and businesses across our Commonwealth are reopening. COVID cases have plummeted, and families are gathering with loved ones. We're getting back to some sense of normalcy. And as we're making progress, we are still facing challenges. And so this tax relief to American families across the country is such an important step of our recovery. I've heard directly from parents across Virginia about the challenges that they're facing, some of the barriers and causes of financial stress. And so this is an issue that's of particular concern to me. And which is why we've made changes to the child tax credit in order to make it refundable, especially as parents are returning to the workplace, as businesses are opening up, and we prepare for kids to return to school, hopefully in a normal fashion. The enhanced child tax credit is meant to give parents the support that they need. Notably, because there is some confusion out there, the tax credit is not taxable income. This is tax relief in its simplest sense, and it's being advanced out to individuals in advance of their tax filing in April of next year. Most families should receive these monthly payments automatically. They'll be monthly, July through December, and then the remainder of the child tax credit will be available to you when you file your taxes in April of next year. For most families, there's no action required, but if you have not received your payment, or if you have any questions about how you'll be receiving it, you can go to irs.gov and go to the Child Tax Credit Update portal. There you'll be able to update your personal information, ensure you're signed up for direct deposit, and you can get additional information about the program. Additionally, you can visit my website, spanberger.house.gov, for more information about the child tax credit and the tax relief it is bringing to hundreds of thousands of children across the Commonwealth, and what it will mean for you and your family. The White House has also prepared many resources about the child tax credit, including information for non-filers, and that's available at childtaxcredit.gov. Again, thanks so much for joining tonight. I look forward to answering your questions about the child tax credit or any other topic. And if you have questions another time outside of this town hall, please do not hesitate to contact my team and my office at 804-401-4110, or you can go to our website at spanberger.house.gov. I look forward to talking to the issues tonight. Your feedback allows me to do my job best for the residents of the 7th District of Virginia, so I look forward to the conversation. Thank you so much, and thanks for being with me.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman. And as a reminder to everybody that's joined us on this call, this forum is very interactive, and we certainly would love to hear your questions. So if you have a question, you can press *3 on your telephone keypad at any time to get into the queue to ask a question. All right, what will happen after you press *3 is a member of the Congresswoman's staff will collect your questions. Next time you hear your name, you will be live on the call and able to ask your question directly. You can also submit a question through our portal below the online streaming player that you'll find at spanberger.house.gov/live. Again, that's spanberger.house.gov/live. So if you're watching on Facebook Live, we do ask that you visit the spanberger.house.gov/live site to submit a question below the online player. While you're at the representative's website, you can also join her quick and easy to stay updated e-newsletter. So again, always stay up to date on what the representative is doing for you at spanberger.house.gov. There you can join her e-newsletter. Now, moving on, we've got our first caller lined up, and it's Lisa. And Lisa, welcome to the call. You are live with Congresswoman Spanberger.
Hi.
Hi, Lisa.
How are you doing?
I'm doing just fine. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. My situation is I have not filed for 2020, and I did not receive the second or third stimulus check, and the child tax credit. I think they would be confused, I guess, if they looked at 2020's taxes. I have 50% custody and my ex has 50%. And so he was the one that they would have looked at the taxes for 2020 since I haven't filed mine, but he said he didn't get anything in the mail or anything today or anything concerning the tax credit. But my situation would be they wouldn't know who I since I haven't filed 2020,
Yes, ma'am.
and we're going back and forth each year as far as who can claim our daughter as a dependent. And so
Okay.
2021 would be my year to claim her as a dependent. So I should start getting the tax credit. But when I go to the portal, it says that I am not eligible. And when I go to the portal for any of the stimulus, it says payment status not available.
Okay, so Lisa, I think there's a couple questions there, and I thank you for calling in with these questions because I'm sure other people have questions along the same line. So I'm going to first do a general answer for what happens if someone hasn't yet filed for 2020. And then I'll get to the second part of your circumstance. So if you haven't yet filed for 2020, your child tax credit will be assessed based off of your 2019 filed taxes. That's the way that it should work. Now, that is not optimal because children get older, your income may change, and certainly you want to make sure, anybody out there listening, you want to make sure that your child tax credit is being assessed off of what's closest to your 2021 earnings and the number and ages of children that you'll have for your 2021 tax filing. So if you haven't yet filed for 2020, you should be getting the payment based off your 2019 numbers, but you can go into the portal at irs.gov to update your personal information related to your children, their ages, and your income. That's also a place where you can opt to have your payments made via direct to payment as opposed to a payment in the mail. So that information should be good for anybody out there who hasn't yet filed. Now, specific to Lisa's circumstance and issues of shared custody, that might vary family to family. So Lisa, I would love for us to take down your information so that my team can follow up with your specific circumstance. And for anybody who's on the line who has had trouble getting the stimulus check if they were eligible for it, notably we'll want to look into that as well, because whatever challenge sort of might have created a hurdle for you to get the stimulus check if you were still eligible for it, might also be the issue that you're facing as it relates to the child tax credit. So Lisa, we'll follow up with you because your circumstance is a bit unique. But just for anybody out there, if you need to update your information because you haven't yet filed your 2020 taxes, you can do that on irs.gov. You can fill out the information for the child tax credit. And in the circumstances like Lisa was mentioning, we can follow up if you've had any trouble getting your stimulus check. And certainly there is the challenge when there is divided custody that typically it's the parent who has custody of the child for more time that receives it. But in certain circumstances, like what Lisa was mentioning, there may be some alternating who gets credit for the child year to year, and that's specific to custody agreements. So we would love to follow up with you, Lisa, and answer your specific question. And again, anyone else out there who might have a unique circumstance, I welcome you to call our office 804-401-4110 for help with your particular instance, if we can answer that.
Our next caller is David, who joins us. David, welcome to the call. You are live with Representative Spanberger. Go ahead with your question, please.
Good afternoon, Congresswoman Spanberger.
Good afternoon,
Hello?
David. I can hear you.
Okay. I called a couple, I guess, maybe 6 months ago for a town hall, but this is a different topic. This has to do with the epidemic of fentanyl-laced drug overdoses. My stepson was one of the victims when it was a casualty. It seems that there's an epidemic of deaths in across Virginia, and especially in the Henrico, Richmond, and Chesterfield area. My stepson was 40 years old in late April. He was at an address in Richmond. Somehow a friend introduced him to some fentanyl-laced cocaine, and his ashes are in the house. He's deceased. One of many victims across the country. I just wondered if there's anything that, and I spoke to Nick about this a couple days after his death, and I think you were aware. He said you were aware of it.
Yes.
entertain the idea of possibly meeting with some of the families and patients, parents of these victims. But can you and Congress do anything to stiffen penalties against these traffickers of poison fentanyl across the country? Because the detective was here a couple days ago with a toxicology report and said that the laws regarding people who provide fentanyl to people who die from them are pretty weak or non-existent. What do you think?
David, I want to begin by expressing my condolences to you for the loss of your stepson. I have spoken to parents, constituents in our district who've lost their children to overdose. And certainly over the last year, the numbers have continued to skyrocket across Virginia, across the country. We're seeing higher rates of overdoses, greater rates of fatality from overdoses. And you mentioned fentanyl as the reason for your stepson's overdose. What we are seeing is the significant increases in potency. The strength of fentanyl-laced drugs has led to increased mortality rates, in addition to so many of the stressors related to the pandemic, isolation and such, particularly for those struggling with recovery. So there's a couple different things. You spoke specifically about how can we go after, or can Congress do something specific to those who are trafficking in these types of narcotics. I have a bill that I co-sponsored called the CAST Act. And that bill would amend the Controlled Substance Act to prohibit the knowing possession of a pill press mold. So essentially, for those who want to make essentially fake or imitation style opiates, this is something that we're commonly seeing, is that people are making counterfeit drugs and positioning them as though they might have been regular medicine, prescription medicine. And so the CAST Act, this bill, what it would do is it would prohibit the knowing possession of a pill press mold with intent to manufacture a counterfeit drug substance. And so that would make it a higher level crime. That's one thing. That's not going to solve the issue overnight, but it is the first step that we can take in going after those who would in fact endeavor to traffic in illegal narcotics and fentanyl-laced drugs. Another thing that I worked on is I led an effort that would allow for states to use the American Rescue Plan funding for opioid and for mental health treatment, both for prevention and for recovery. So certainly when I've been traveling across our district, hearing from parents like you, hearing from law enforcement officers across our 10 counties, I know that one of the biggest challenges that our communities continue to face is dealing with both education and prevention efforts to prevent people from using all types of drugs, and in particular opiates, and also helping those who are in recovery. And so with those federal dollars that the United States Congress pushed to the states and localities, our intent was to help with the recovery. And part of that is preventing further addiction and helping those who are in recovery. So those are two pieces in terms of the more aggressively going after those who are making counterfeit drugs for the purposes of addicting and trafficking in those illegal drugs. And then the other is allowing the states and localities to be able to utilize those American Rescue Plan funds for the purposes of education, prevention, and recovery services.
So, Congresswoman, I'd like to move forward next to an online question. It was submitted by Stuart, who states, your co-sponsorship of H.R. 2241, Civilian Climate Corps, highlights reforestation. Will this be folded into Biden's infrastructure bill, and will this improve Central Virginia's jobs?
Oh, that's a Very interesting question. Thank you for knowing about the legislation. So I am chair of the Conservation and Forestry Subcommittee of the larger Agriculture Committee. And so I am the only Virginian to serve on the Agriculture Committee in the United States Congress, and I take that role and position very seriously, and I serve there with great enthusiasm. As the chair of the Conservation and Forestry Subcommittee, I have been really focused on the place where we can unite farmers and producers with our efforts to fight climate change. And I have worked on a variety of pieces of legislation in this space that I have led. You mentioned one of them that I'm particularly proud of, that is focused on recognizing the value of our country's forests for their role in sequestering carbon, for their role in a whole host of things, and the Civilian Climate Corps that you mentioned. In the early proposals, certainly what's come out of the Biden administration is they are aligned and have proposed that future pieces of legislation that would incorporate the American Families Plan proposal or the American Jobs Plan proposal does incorporate that. And then my Senate counterparts just released yesterday their initial intentions as it relates to work on climate. And in their proposal, they do, in fact, include provisions that would be the Civilian Climate Corps. So, yes, it would incorporate my piece of legislation. And the reason this is incredibly important in terms of expanding job opportunities is because this is an area of growth, allowing for individuals to get job training, focused on jobs that are building resiliency for our climate, focused on our physical infrastructure across the country is incredibly important. Certainly as we see wildfires ravaging the West Coast, as we see record heats impacting our agricultural communities on the West Coast, the value of these programs is even more obvious now more than ever. I was excited to see that in the proposal that the Senate is still considering, in addition to the Civilian Climate Corps, they're looking at a variety of other climate-related proposals related to clean energy standards, climate-smart agriculture and wildfire prevention, as well as prioritizing clean and innovative technologies in federal procurement. And so I'm very excited about a lot of the movement that's occurred in this place. I also have one other piece of legislation called the Growing Climate Solutions Act, which is an important piece of legislation. It's foundational in terms of allowing for farmers and foresters and producers to be part of the climate, the solution as we contend with climate change. And that bill actually just recently, the Senate version, just passed the Senate with significant bipartisan support, and we're continuing to push it in the House, ideally towards passage in the coming months. So thank you so much for that question.
So as a quick reminder, this forum tonight is interactive. If you have a question you would like to ask Congresswoman Spanberger, all you need to do is press *3 on your telephone keypad to enter the question queue. Again, if you're listening on the phone to this conversation, press *3 if you have a question you would like to ask. And we're moving back to the phone now. We've got Holly joining us on the line. Holly, welcome to the call. You're live with Congresswoman Spanberger. Go ahead with your question.
Yes, hello, Congresswoman Spanberger. I appreciate you taking the time for my call. This morning on the news, I heard that inflation had risen 5%. And I would like to know what your take on this is and what your plan of action is to get it back where it needs to be.
Thank you so much for raising this question, Holly. This is top of mind for me as well, and for my colleagues in Congress. We just had Chairman of the Federal Reserve, Jay Powell, come before Congress to speak to this very issue. I have been reading up on economists. I'm tracking it very closely. And frankly, for anybody who has gone to the store recently, there are some notable upticks in prices on a variety of different types of goods. And so these are a result of supply chain issues, It's a result of we are still in a transitory place as it relates to our economy. We are still recovering from the shutdowns related to COVID, and notably across the across different industries, we've seen different challenges, particularly as it relates to supply chain. Certainly, in the earlier days of the pandemic, much of the conversations were about the price of lumber. We saw the price of lumber going through the roof, and now those prices have stabilized. They are back down to normal, and so looking at supply chain issues and early in the COVID days and throughout the pandemic, we had major shutdowns of meat processing plants, as an example, leading to challenges in our food supply. Over the past couple months, when we saw major electrical outages within Texas, that caused significant issues to our supply chain as well. So there's a variety of different factors. I am concerned about the inflation that we're facing. I'm continuing to monitor it, but we are seeing a trajectory where some of the earliest points of inflation that we saw, and I do give lumber as an example, prices have stabilized. So in terms of what it is that I am doing about it, I'm watching it closely, and every choice that I am making as a lawmaker, where I am voting related to the choices that I'm making of how to spend taxpayer dollars and where to make investments, I am doing so with that thought in mind of where are we making strong investments for our economy and to ensure that we are getting as much of the American workforce back to work or back to new jobs as we move forward to strengthen our economy. Thank you, Holly.
Next up on the line, we've got Michael joining us. Michael, welcome to the call. Go ahead with your question, please.
Hello, Congresswoman. Thank you for taking my call. I have mixed feelings about the tax child credit, and
Okay.
my question is twofold. One is there like an income limit on this? And secondly, is it truly just a tax credit, or is it also more of a welfare type situation where people will actually get more money back than they pay in taxes?
So I think you dug into what some of your concerns are with that. So I'll speak to your questions. So the child tax credit was first put in place in 1997, and I don't know your personal family circumstance, Michael, but typically what one can do is they can file taxes, get that child tax credit, and they see that come off the top on their taxes. The difference here in making it refundable, it is realized tax relief for Americans, and it is tiered. So the maximum that one can receive is $3,600 per child, and that is for children 0 to 6. And then from there, the expanded tax credit goes to $3,000 from 7 to 17. One of the changes that we made with the legislation was to include 17-year-olds. Previously, dependent 17-year-olds hadn't been eligible for the regular tax credit. In the way that it is refundable, we made it so that half of the tax credit goes out to recipients month by month, July through December, and then the other half is available at the time that one files taxes. So ultimately, a married couple filing together, filing jointly, they would see their tax credit, I said what those higher limits are, the $3,600 for children and the $3,000, or the $3,600 for infants and then the $3,000 for children. That's for married couples making up to $150,000 a year, or single heads of household making up to $112,500 a year. From there, it tapers, and it continues to plateau and taper for married couples up until the point where they're exceeding $400,000 in joint income, and for single heads of households exceeding $200,000 in income. So this is really a tax relief for middle class and working families. And the child tax credit is meant to be just that. It's meant to help working families, middle-class families with the cost of childcare, with the cost of having children in the home, and make it a bit more usable than, in fact, it previously was when you have to wait to file your taxes. And you asked one question about whether people, if they're not paying taxes, if they're eligible for it. Anyone who is not making enough to have a tax liability is eligible, if they have qualifying children, for this refundable tax credit, for this tax relief. And ultimately, I think it's an important investment that we're making in our country because child poverty costs our country $1 trillion a year. And the investment that we're making in this child tax credit is a portion, a fraction of that. So the investment that we are making in lifting approximately the investment that we're making in cutting child poverty by 55%, I think is a very important one for our economy. It's an important one for families. It's certainly an important one for those children. But this is not specific to lower income families. The child tax credit, as I mentioned, is for working middle class families with joint incomes exceeding $400,000 and single heads of household exceeding $200,000.
Moving on to our next live question, we're joined by Carmen. Carmen, welcome to the call. Go ahead with your question.
Well, first, Congresswoman, thank you very much for taking the time and the call. And I related to the other gentleman that previously spoke about the fentanyl. And I think your answer was good in some of the things you're doing. However, it's a supply and demand. And we have chaos at the border, drugs pouring in, human trafficking, sex trafficking gangs. It all ties back. The crime in the cities, most of it's probably drug related. If we don't cut off the supply and stop these drugs from coming in, everything else we're doing will be like a dog chasing its tail in a circle. What's your stand about trying to get the border under control?
Well, Carmen, thank you for this question. My stance about trying to get the border under control is we are the United States of America. We have a right and a responsibility to know who and what is entering our country. That is a stance that I have long held. Before I ever started thinking about running to be your representative, Carmen, I started my career as a federal agent. I worked narcotics cases and money laundering cases, and I used to work out of the DC area doing drug cases. That was my earliest professional experience. So this is an issue that is important to me. I had previously worked on the HIDTA, the High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area Task Force in the Baltimore, Washington area. And I've seen firsthand the decimation that drug dealing and drug use can really wreak on communities. From there, I went to CIA, and while I was at CIA, I worked a time tracking and collecting information on large narco traffickers throughout Central America and Mexico. So the issue of drugs in our cities and the issue of how they get here has been one that has been an important part of my professional career long before I came to Congress. So that's an important frame for why and how I view this issue as I do. I worked a lot last Congress, so 2019 to 2020, with a former colleague named Will Hurd, a Republican from Texas, who had the longest stretch of southern border was his district. And we worked together on legislation that would provide that did a whole host of things, but it was focused on strengthening our information related to what's happening at the border, utilizing intelligence to be able to get at some of the root causes of migration, circumstances of violence, circumstances of human trafficking, and also contending with the issue of narco and human traffickers throughout Central America. This piece of legislation was signed into law by former President Trump, and I'm very proud of that. But the issue continues to persist, Carmen. And so I continue to be focused for lack of a better word, fighting narco traffickers and human traffickers. And that means getting at some of the root causes of instability that provides them with an unstable amount of, or an outsized amount of power within Central America and within Mexico. And also focusing on the issue related to immigration. I've worked on some bipartisan pieces of immigration reform, particularly focused on workforce needs. The Farm Workforce Modernization Act was an important piece of legislation. It passed through the House with bipartisan support. I'm pushing for it to move in the Senate. And this piece of legislation is recognizing that some of the reasons that smugglers are able to victimize would-be immigrants and individuals who want to come to this country is because there is a workforce need here. And so allowing for our farmers and producers to be able to hire workers from outside the United States legally through the H-2A visa program is an important step for us as the United States, knowing who's coming to our country and ensuring that we have pipelines for a legal workforce that meets the needs of our, in this case, of our agricultural communities, but also ensures that those who want to come to this country can do so legally and in a safer and more secure manner, which is part and parcel of kind of getting at that strength that the human traffickers that you mentioned were focused on. Beyond that, I have been, through the appropriations process, a strong supporter of the work of the Drug Enforcement Administration and the other entities, particularly my former employer, CIA, that does so much in the way of tracking narco trafficking throughout Central America and Mexico as it makes its way north. And I do thank you for this question. I think I could probably continue going on and on and on. So I'll stop myself there, Michael, or Carmen, excuse me. But I'm happy to follow up with you if you have any further questions about other pieces of legislation.
So I'd like to take a quick detour and pause from the live calls for just a moment. As I look at my console, we have a lot of people participating in this live telephone town hall with Congresswoman Spanberger. If you're on the phone and you have a question you would like to ask live on this call, all you need to do is press *3 on your telephone keypad. Again, press *3 to enter our question queue to ask a question live. This live town hall is also being streamed online. It's at spanberger.house.gov/live. If you're watching on Facebook Live, we do ask that you go to the spanberger.house.gov/live site. Right beneath that player is a place for you to put your name and question to ask a question through our online system. Again, to keep up to date on everything that Representative Spanberger is doing for you in D.C. and beyond, you can join the Congresswoman's e-newsletter. The easiest way to do that is to go to her website, spanberger.house.gov. And now we're going back to the phones. As I said, we've got Daniel on the line, I believe. Daniel, welcome to the call. Go ahead with your question. We have Janet. Looks like a question about prescription drugs. Daniel?
This is Janet's husband, Dave.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, Dave. Go ahead with your question, please. You're live.
Hi. My wife and I finally retired as of the 1st of June, and we worked until we're both 70 years old, and have done our filings for Medicare and the comparable plans. But it's a real mess out there trying to figure out which ones to get, even with professional help. Mm-hmm. And, of course, the price of drugs even on the retirement plans are a lot higher than they were on the private plans that we were on before. And I wanted to know what Abigail is trying to do to help solve the problem.
Well, thank you for this question, Dave, and congratulations to you and Janet on your retirement, first and foremost. And I'm sorry about the challenges that you're facing as you try to make sense of the healthcare space as a retiree. And unfortunately, your comment, your question is one that I have heard far too often. So I have been a proponent of, I have voted for, I have co-sponsored a bill that is called HR 3. It's the Lower Prescription Drug Costs Now Act. Because interestingly, and I don't know if you know this, Dave, but interestingly, Medicare is not prohibited, is not permitted, and it is legally prohibited from negotiating its prescription drug prices. So this doesn't make any sense, right? In our capitalist society in the United States of America, the idea that Medicare would actually be prohibited from negotiating its prescription drug prices doesn't make sense, and it impacts and harms patients. And notably, this is different within the VA system. They can negotiate their prescription drug prices. This is really an issue that only impacts the Medicare system. And so it's important. So HR 3 was a bill that I co-sponsored, I voted for in the last Congress, voted for again in this Congress. And there's a push to move it in the Senate. It did receive bipartisan support in the House because it makes sense. Right? Medicare should be able to negotiate its prescription drug prices and the prices that are passed along to its patients. Notably, with HR 3, not only does it allow for Medicare to negotiate the prescription drug prices, but it allows commercial insurers. So if you have adult children or neighbors and friends who are not yet Medicare eligible but use private insurers, HR 3, the Lower Drug Costs Now Act, would allow for those private insurers to utilize the benefit of the negotiated rates that Medicare is able to pursue. So that's a big issue for me. That's what I've been working for, particularly as it relates to the cost of prescription drugs. In addition to that, I've done a lot in the space of the challenges that our small and community pharmacies are facing. There are a lot of ways and places where small community pharmacies really are feeling the brunt of the rising costs of prescription drugs, and particularly the rising influence of middlemen organizations called the pharmacy benefit managers. So you've got the patient on one side, you've got a pharmacy benefit manager, and then you've got the pharmaceutical company. And in the middle there, it's a bit of a black box in terms of how that pricing is done. And so I have introduced, and last Congress it passed with significant bipartisan support. In fact, literally no one voted against it. Everybody who was at work that day voted for my bill that would ensure transparency for the discounts and rebates that pharmacy benefit managers utilize to kind of pull in and attract business, because in fact, those rebates, those pricing gimmicks are hurting consumers and across the board largely a contributing factor to the rising cost of prescription drugs. And one more thing before I finish answering this question, I would mention that HR 3, the bill that I spoke about that would allow for Medicare to negotiate its prescription drugs, as we passed it, that bill would have billions of dollars of savings, right? Because being able to negotiate drugs allows you greater buying power. And the bill as it's written reinvests that savings in dental, optical, and hearing coverage for retirees. And that's incredibly important because dental, hearing, and optical are important elements of one's health, particularly once you're in a point in your life where you're Medicare eligible. And so I think that's an important utilization of the billions of dollars in savings that HR 3 would bring. And so I'm proud of that piece of legislation. We passed it in the House again. We're working to get it to move in the Senate. But really, HR 3 and then price negotiation. It's straightforward. We're a capitalist country. Everybody should be for negotiations. If pharmacies around the block can negotiate their prices, why can't Medicare? So thank you so much, and congratulations again on your retirement.
All right, Congresswoman. Our next caller is George, who joins us on the line live. George, welcome to the call. Go ahead with your question, please.
Hello, everyone. And first of all, I want to say thank you, Representative Spanberger, for all that you do do for us. My question is, as far as the infrastructure bill, what you think is the main cause that we're not, getting that through? we really need a lot of stuff done as far as infrastructure is concerned right now, roads, bridges, et cetera. What would you say is one of the main causes for it not being able to get through the system right now?
My real answer, George, it's politics. I hate to say it, but it's politics. But let me tell you the good news and why I'm hopeful that we will be making the important investments that our country needs to make in roads, bridges, internet, electrical infrastructure. So I am part of a bipartisan group in Congress called the Problem Solvers Caucus. We're 29 Democrats, 29 Republicans, and we meet together at least once a week to talk about issues big and small, find places where we can agree, acknowledge the places we disagree, and pledge to keep working together. And so we have been focused on infrastructure for quite some time because Democrat, Republican, Independent, anybody recognizes that investments in our nation's infrastructure is an investment in our country. When we have the grades coming out on our roads and bridges, when we have inspectors, calling 911 to say, get people off this bridge because it may collapse at any minute, we have a problem. We're the United States of America. We should have infrastructure that reflects our strength as a nation in the world. And it's important because this is job creating. And certainly as we continue to come out of this pandemic, ensuring that we have jobs across the country is important. So what's been the challenge? The challenge is that there's a lot of stuff that people want to do. And I've been part of a group that has said, there are so many things. We've got the White House has come out with their American Jobs Plan proposal, the American Families Plan proposal, and there's many elements of those proposals that are important discussion points. But let's tease out the physical infrastructure piece of it, roads, bridges, broadband internet, electrical grid. And let's work on that because that's a place where we can find agreement. That's not to say let's forget about the other stuff. Let's say, let's move forward on the physical infrastructure piece. So I went to a summit in Maryland, Democrats, Republicans, House members, senators, and governors, including Governor Northam from Virginia, Governor Hogan from Maryland. We've had governors from other states, Democrats and Republicans, talking about what do they want to see in their states? What are the challenges they as state executives see? And then where do we as members of Congress agree on what we need to do? So ultimately, we came out with a proposal. The Senate pushed out a proposal. And as of right now, within the Senate, they're taking the lead on drafting the legislation. And really, you asked, what's the holdup? A little bit of the holdup is the politics of it, because there are some people who say, yeah, I want to do that, but I don't want to give up on my the things I want as well. And so it's been an issue of kind of scope. So I've been focused on making the scope clear. We're talking about physical infrastructure. We can talk about all of the other policy priorities that people want to pursue, but right here, let's talk about physical infrastructure. So reports out of the Senate are they are going to take a vote, ideally before the end of the month, on a bill related to physical infrastructure. There's already, last time I saw the count, there were already 22 senators on record saying that they supported the framework that would invest in our physical infrastructure across the country, that there's enough of both parties to ensure that we do not have to concern ourselves with that 60 vote threshold with the filibuster. It looks as though they will have met that threshold. And so on the House side, we're garnering support among our colleagues, Democrats and Republicans, so that as soon as the Senate votes on their infrastructure bill, we will take that next step. And so that's where we are right now. There's been a lot of fits and starts. Right now, I think we're in a place where we're actually moving. I will be in close contact with and watching my Senate colleagues in the coming 2 weeks. Ideally, we'll be taking a vote on that within the coming, it would be about 3 weeks. And so I'm going to continue pushing. And so I think for those who have been focused on larger proposals, this is not to the exclusion of any other policy priority. This is just scoping out the physical infrastructure piece that has a lot broader bipartisan agreement, moving forward with that piece of legislation, and then continuing on with additional policy objectives. So I've been working on this. it's been ebbing and flowing. It's been exciting, but to be in a room full of people who typically disagree on a lot, and to have us all say, yes, this is what our community needs. We need investments in infrastructure. We need to have the infrastructure worthy of the 21st century. We need to ensure that our roads are safe, our bridges aren't falling down, and that our electrical grids are efficient, let's say from a climate change standpoint, but also not vulnerable to hacking, as we've seen the threats related to the ransomware attacks. So people are, well, I'll say this, I'm excited, I'm cautiously optimistic, but ideally we'll see movement in the Senate first within the coming 2 to 3 weeks. So thank you so much for that question, George.
All right, next our question comes from Cecil, who joins us on the line. Cecil, welcome to the call. You're live with Representative Spanberger.
Thank you for your time, Congresswoman Spanberger. You may remember me, but I asked for information about homeless veterans.
Yes.
And everybody was talking about their problems, but I was talking about people who are less fortunate than me. Mm-hmm. And tonight, it's my understanding that the war in Afghanistan is going to be over. And it's my understanding that the war costs $10 billion a week. And the victims, the casualties who have been medically discharged because of a direct line of service connected, mm-hmm. and they have a choice whether to take 50% of their base pay or compensation from the VA. And with all that money going around, why can't they have both?
So Cecil, thank you for this question in terms of the VA system and how benefits are given out. I would have to dig into the formularies a lot more to be able to answer that question. In terms of where I've been actively advocating and working on behalf of our nation's and our community's veterans, is I've been working to ensure that veterans who have been particularly impacted by their service have their service-connected disabilities recognized. Certainly in the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, we've seen a different type of exposure-related injury. So exposure to jet fuel, exposure to hazardous chemicals while serving as military firefighters, exposure to burn pits. And this is, the current generation's exposure-related challenges. In years past, we've had the Blue Water Navy and World War II, and after we had our atomic veterans. And just a side note on that, I am so excited that President Biden put out a proclamation declaring tomorrow Atomic Veterans Day, because there's an entire generation of U.S. service members who kept their service and their exposure to radiation a secret. Many of them contracted radiation-related illnesses. Many of them died far, far too young. But for those who continue the fight for recognition for their brothers in arms, tomorrow will be a good day that they'll have that recognition. I'm proud to represent one of the most forceful advocates on the issue of recognizing our nation's atomic veterans as a constituent, which is one of the reasons why issues of military exposures are so important to me. So I've introduced a variety of pieces of legislation focused on types of exposures that are not currently covered as service-connected disability. But in terms of digging into whether or not we would change the larger VA formulary, that would be an issue that would happen within the VA. And I can certainly, Cecil, if you'd like further follow-up on that, I can certainly look into that formulary a bit more, how the decisions are made, how often it is updated. But my area of direct engagement has been ensuring that our veterans with exposure-related illnesses get the service-connected injury and disability that they have earned through their extraordinary service.
So, Congresswoman, looking at the clock, we have time for just one more question. And we're bringing on Steve live to the call. Steve, welcome. Go ahead with your question, please.
Hi, I appreciate you taking the call. I appreciate your balanced approach to representing us. It's just amazing. It really is. You're doing a great job. I don't know that I've had the opportunity with anyone else who's ever represented us to have the opportunity to have access. Not that it's impossible, but this is a much better approach to having access to your ear.
Thank you.
My main question actually relates to the post office, which might have an ancillary impact on the child tax credit if people can't get their checks. We need to get it fixed, basically. And if you could do anything to move in the direction of getting more competent people running it and making more competent decisions about how equipment and services are being used or not used, I would really appreciate that.
Well, thank you for your question, and thank you for raising one of my favorite elements of the United States government, which is the United States Postal Service. The United States Postal Service is in the Constitution, right? The Constitution prescribes that the federal government will maintain the maintenance of postal roads because our founding fathers understood that the value of keeping people connected would allow for our country to grow and our economy to grow. And in fact, the Postal Service has been just paramount and central to our nation's development, particularly as we were a young country with people spread across as we moved westward. And it's true that in years past, the Postal Service, the post office has faced pretty significant challenges. There's been prior laws passed that place incredible burdens on the Postal Service. For example, there's currently a requirement that the Postal Service pre-fund its retirement decades into the future. And this is certainly not a retirement that any business would ever put upon itself because it doesn't make any financial sense. And of course, not surprisingly, it's created a real cash flow issue for the United States Postal Service. I am a strong supporter of the Postal Service because, frankly, I hear from small business owners across our district who depend on it to drive their business. And so, I have been very active, visited the post office multiple times, but very active when we were alerted to the fact that there were some strategic shutdowns or potentially strategic shutdowns meant to really slow the delivery of mail. At this point, the Oversight Committee in the United States Congress has been heavily focused on watching the management of the Postal Service, ensuring that there are not kind of arbitrary decisions meant to impede it or hurt it. And notably, I have been active with the new administration, calling on Biden to ensure that he's actually filling the Postal Board of Governors seats. And so far, the Senate has actually confirmed 3 of Biden's nominees. Part of the challenge for quite some time is that the Board of Governors was not at full complement. So having those nominees not only nominated, but also confirmed has been an important step forward. So thank you for your attention to the Postal Service. Thank you for the opportunity you've given me to sing its praises. And certainly thanks to all the postal workers out there. I had the occasion to meet one postal worker, particularly when we were experiencing pretty significant delays last summer, who took his hat off. He was in his uniform. He was out delivering mail, took his hat off and said, "It says Postal Service. This is service. It's a service that I bring to the community. And I'm proud of my job." And so that's the strength of the United States Postal Service. They have been a differentiator as we've grown as a nation. And I will continue to support the value that they bring. And thank you so much for this question. And and thank you for your kind words as well.
So, Congresswoman, as we begin to wind this call down, do you have any final thoughts for us?
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I do. I just want to say thank you to everyone for joining us tonight. I appreciate that you let me come into your living rooms, kitchens, telephones, computers. Thanks for spending some time. I know there continue to be questions about the tax relief that is the child tax credit. So for anyone with questions, we have resources on my website at spanberger.house.gov. We've got links to all of the different websites for IRS, for childtaxcredit.gov. We have our own resources, and I hope that you'll make use of those. If you have a particular unique circumstance and you want to talk it through with someone from my team, please give us a call at 804-410-4110. And just a reminder that I am here to serve you. My office is here to serve you. So if you're facing any challenges with a federal agency, the VA, Social Security, OPM, please do recognize that we can be a resource for you. And please do be in touch if we can serve as that resource. I've really appreciated the conversation tonight. Thank you to everyone who called in or wrote in with a question. I look forward to our next town hall, and I look forward to future ones via telephone, on the internet, and of course in person. So I hope everyone's staying safe, doing well. And again, thank you so much for joining me this evening. And happy Atomic Veterans Day tomorrow.
Very good. As mentioned, we are coming to the end of this live event this evening. Thank you to everyone for taking the time to join us for this important Central Virginia-focused telephone town hall with Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger. We do appreciate the opportunity to answer your questions, but if we weren't able to get to your question this evening, you can call our district office at 804-401-4110. Again, the district office number, 804-401-4110. During normal business hours, you'll get someone who will answer your call or leave a message. You can always go to the representative's website at spanberger.house.gov. Thanks again for joining us. We hope you stay healthy and safe and have a wonderful evening.